Welcome back to our channel. For those of you who are new to our channel, we are One Rule, where there is one rule: make and share art weekly. And what better way to consistently build these habits and break through creative blocks than to do a good old art challenge. Now, the ground rules of these art challenges are as follows. We must execute the challenge within 2 hours. We have to hit all the criteria set by the magical art dice. I can't see. Where's the camera? We also have to keep our art hidden until we hop on a Zoom call and reveal it to each other. And you, that's right, you have to let us know who did better, and let us know in the comments. This week I challenged my friend Will to create a pop art inspired piece. The magical art dice gave us the following criteria to follow. We had to use pastels as the medium. We also had to use the color red in some way. And the subject had to be fish. And we also needed to make sure that it was an underwater seascape. Before we get into it, smack the like button, hit subscribe, and now let's go see some art.
Pop art, in my opinion, doesn't really work well with pastels. They're kind of like a little bit opposite in terms of approach, where when I think of pop art, I think of high contrast, very saturated, manufactured look to it. If we think of like Andy Warhol, like something that could be mass produced. If we think of like Lichtenstein, he had like kind of like a comic approach to things where everything was very saturated, poppy, comic book like, highly reproducible. So pastels are very soft, and when you think pastel, you think of like muted or neutral colors. You don't really think of high saturation. So I kind of leveraged the fact that I could start soft with pastels, and then, if I just want to get more saturated with it, I can press harder later on. I took some inspiration from Joanna's last piece where she based it off of from her mind. So I didn't actually reference anything for this piece. And so I wanted to create something that, looked like a fish in like an artificial way.
I took about 15 minutes of our 2-hour segment and I looked up some resources. And the first thing I looked up was, what does underwater look like? Because I needed to be reminded. And I was a little afraid because I have a slight phobia of underwater scenes. This one was a big challenge. Pastel is not a medium I ever really go to. I use it selectively for very specific things, and if I'm in the realm of a pastel, it's likely a piece of charcoal. So this was totally out of my realm of experience. When I think of pop art, I also think of highly saturated colors, something that is kind of like almost looks like a color theory experiment or something, like something that's like super, very outlined. At the end, I thought I was done. And I was like, okay, let me spray this before I smudge it. I sprayed it, and then I realized, oh my God, I lost all the saturation. I did not take a photo of anything yet. And I was like, oh no. I went back in and layered another, like legit, like colored it all back in. I became a little bit more happy with it.
I just don't think that I dedicated enough time to it in order to reach a level where it feels very highly manufactured.
I am ready. What? You did that fish from memory?
Yeah. For the background lines, the goal for it was at first like to be sort of like a comic book style shape, and then I was like, this kind of looks like a pattern, almost like a web or a net. So then I just kind of pushed that further and was thinking maybe it's a fish caught in a net in the ocean after it was trying to catch, a worm. I probably had like over 10 layers on the fish's body for the scales of it, and it wasn't looking more pop art by the end. Like I should have stopped after like the first or second layer, when it looked more like a pattern, and like now it just looks like something that I had started to render and then cut short.
It's whimsical. I feel like pop art has like a whimsical feel. Do you feel like there's a fine line when trying to do something in a pop art style, that there's a fine line between making it look juvenile or elementary and also getting it to look intentionally pop art. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And maybe I should have pushed it in the opposite direction and just focused on like solid, sharp lines and shapes. But again, it's just not really something that I'm used to doing with pastels.
There we are.
I think yours looks a lot more like pop arty. You have more like two-dimensional shapes. You stuck more with like traditional pop art aesthetic in that way. I could tell that you used a grittier paper for sure.
It's a type of cardstock, and I think it might be like a linen type of texture cardstock, and it's also black. I also wasn't sure if this was going to be the right choice, but it was mainly a choice for the medium, not for the style. If it's not obvious, my inspiration in my Google searching led me to a comfortable spot of Finding Nemo. One of the main things I think of when I think of pop art is I think of Andy Warhol's like Marilyn Monroe, where it's like different iterations of color combinations. And I was like, well, we know what Finding Nemo, you know, Dory and the daddy fish. I forgot his name. Oh my God, what was his name?
I can't
Was
remember.
it like Eugene or something?
That sounds right.
Gerald? But anyway, it's daddy fish and Dory, except they are not their true colors. And the stuff in the corner, what do you think that is?
I wasn't sure if it was like some sort of sea plant, or it could be, I guess, like maybe coral or something.
I was going for coral. I didn't know how to do coral in a pop art style. I don't love this one, but it was definitely a challenge, and I'm happy I did it. And I'm happy I went back to a medium that I don't normally use.
I mean, I feel the same about my piece for this. Like, I'm happy I did it, but I don't love it. And there's things I wish that I tackled differently.
Looking at images, just Google image sheet of just underwater images was a little triggering. Growing up, I couldn't swim in a pool by myself. Like, you could not leave me in a pool by myself. I had an irrational fear that a shark was gonna bite me. Like, there's a shark in a pool, but it never left me. It's weird to be almost 30 and also have a weird fear of being alone in a pool. It's so irrational. It just seems so stupid, but I still to this day do not like it.
Well, I feel like everybody's got their, idiosyncrasies and their little fears of different things. So for what it's worth, I think that's a rational one because there's, unknowns in the ocean, of course.
I'll take that. Thanks for validating it.
It's nice that you got to experiment with pastels, which you don't usually work with, and I got to work with pastels in a way that I don't usually work with them. It kind of makes me want to experiment more with it and see what's possible if I were to approach this from a different angle.
It got my creative brain kind of like running, which was nice. It was nice to feel that.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching.
We'll see you in the next challenge.
Woo!